Hello, wonderful people and viewers and listeners to Overcast. Today we have an episode that we've been trying to get going for a good amount of time. Blood Decay, because you've seen that talent. What the fuck is Marcelian? Give me a second. God damn it. Hey man, we got the podcast. Where you at?
Man, I'm in the woods hunting for Ian Coasters, man. What are you calling me for?
Come on, man. We gotta talk about Blood Decay. What are you doing?
Man, I don't know how the fuck a Blood Decay can attack with a two-handed weapon and shit. Where's the goddamn shield, man?
All right. Fuck off. We gotta kick it out. You don't know shit.
Hey.
Oh shit, I actually hung up. I don't know if you wanted to say anything anymore. But welcome everybody to the podcast. Today we have a really awesome selection of people to talk about Blood Decay. And you might know some of them or not, but from my, which side is that? Is that left? We have Darkmech, Banter, which you might have seen on some of our other episodes. Down below we have Panthea, who is the author and potentially owner of TankNotes. He will probably tell you more about that, which TankNotes is a link that you'll find down below in the description for all the things you want to know about tanks. And of course, Mandl, one of the, if not the leading voice on Blood Decay, and he clarified the fact that I'm a shitty Blood Decay, but it's okay. That's not important. What's important is that, guys, starting with Dark, I think just let people know who you are, what you do, and things like that.
So my name is Darkmech. I'm an Australian, try-hard Blood Decay. I'm a sponsored streamer for BDGG and pretty much generally try and act as another voice for Mandl, I guess, in a short description of myself. Yeah.
Puppet Master International, yeah?
Puppet Master International. I make YouTube guides, Blood Decay content, not as good as Marcelian and Flame, but I try, and mostly Mythic Plus content.
Well, thank you for the compliments. It's big coming from you, because I remember watching your DK guides back, I think in Legion/WOD, must have been WOD. Before we even started having this, so that's how I know you. And for anybody who doesn't know Mr. Banter, who are you, man?
Hi, I'm also a Australian DK, I guess, and probably a bit of tryhard as well. But I'm not sponsored by Big Dog Gaming, unfortunately. I run the Acris Discord, the DK Discord, and I'm an admin there.
All right, good stuff. And what about the before-mentioned Mandl?
Well, I'm basically doing all the guides for Wirehead and Icy Veins, and I occasionally work on the Simcraft APL for Blood Decay. That's about it, really.
Oh, I know that Mandl does a lot more for the WoW community in general, but we'll leave that to him if you guys don't know if he wants to talk about it or not.
Yeah, just general log review, helping people out, trying to basically bring the level of the community up.
Yeah.
Because more tanks is better, and better tanks are better as well.
Especially Blood Decays. All right. And Panthea, last but not least.
I also write the guides on Blood Decay for Wowhead and Icy Veins. We share that together with Mandl. Also write the Prop Paladin guide for Icy Veins. I also have a all-tank/all-role guide website of TankNotes, which has raid guides and Mythic Plus guides, content, and how to actually get better at that content as a player. Also very active in multiple class Discord communities, helping people improve. And just an all-round bottom tank player who will just play whatever's good.
All right. As far as we know, Panthea has been helping us with a lot of tank connections over the years, and of course, Mandl as well helped us a lot with understanding Blood better. And in all of our guides, I don't know when was the first one that we asked you for the feedback of, because I know we did one where could have been better. Let's say could have been better. Might have been 8.1.
That was 8.1, I think. Yeah, that was BOD.
Was a long time ago, but there's a collection of people enjoying the Blood Decay spec, and I feel like Blood Decay isn't getting enough credit as much as it should. But let's actually talk a little bit about when do you guys think Blood Decay had maybe the best iteration, and what you might have found the most fun about the spec? And share that with the people. And let's start with Panthea this time.
I'd say it was probably kind of in the MOP WOD era. And this is just tanking in general. You had a lot more control over how you played as a tank, how your choices impacted the total outcome in terms of throughput, whether it was damage or healing. So in MOP, this was mostly done by the Vengeance system, where it was risk reward, but taken a bit too far, and you got the reward a bit too easily, where the more damage you took, the more attack power you gained, which influenced your healing, your damage done. This was kind of tuned back in WOD, where it was just the healing part, but then you also played into breath a bit more. So you had a bit more focus on your rotation and optimizing your runic power flow to have longer breath cycles, and then that meant that you were doing more damage because your breath was longer, and your breath also healed you, so you got healing through that. So it wasn't completely wasted runic power use of, oh, I'm just using it all on damage. No, that damage is also healing me. So that kind of control over tanking is what I and many other tanks in the past have enjoyed about tanking, and that's kind of been slowly stripped away over the years and over the expansions. That's kind of my ideal time of tanking in general, and also tanking on DK.
Oh, I perfectly agree with that. As a tank amateur myself, I mostly enjoy the time when I have a lot, or I feel like I have a lot of control of the damage that I take, and I can. Sometimes I can feel whenever I swap into something that's a little bit more RNG. Although there's not a lot of RNG going around, that's probably why I personally like Pro Warrior right now a lot. I just feel like I have a tool for most things that happen, so I can see that. What about you, Mandl?
I'd add 4.3 Cataclysm to this. So for those who were fortunate enough to know that era, or unfortunate if you played early Cataclysm, Blood Decay was basically fundamentally broken for most of the expansion. In that, if you basically missed with Death Strike, as in got parried, dodged, or whatever, you would not get the healing. And in addition to that, all the stamina multipliers that we enjoy today were not present on Blood Decay. So as a result, Blood Decay was the only tank that required expertise cap, as in expertise hard cap, in order to survive for 2 of the 3 tiers of Cataclysm. They reverted all this when Dragon Soul came out, and honestly, it was one of the most enjoyable times to be a Blood DK, because you had all the tools coming from Wrath plus Cataclysm, you had all the problems fixed, you probably had the highest amount of stamina out of any tank. Mastery was not a meme as it is today. It worked in every content, not just the hardest type of content. And yeah, in general, it was just super enjoyable. You had full control over everything. You had a deep and meaningful rotation. You had AoE cooldowns to help your group. You had everything, basically. And that turned into MOP Death Knight, which was also really good. WOD Death Knight, which was also really good. And then the Legion rework and BFA kind of started stripping things away from Blood DK, one after the other. And it led to where we are today.
So Cataclysm, God, that's a long time ago. And what about you, Bento? I see you drinking your water from your green bottle suspiciously. What about your history with the...
Yeah.
Sure. We totally trust you. We totally trust what you're saying right now. When was your favorite time with Blood DK?
Easy answer. I think you might already know this, Flame. Good old Blackrock Foundry DK. Foundry Blood DK.
Dude, multi-strike breath.
Oh man. Every global cooldown you had to think of, like, you had about 4 different decisions. If you should keep your breath going, if you had to quickly death strike because you made a mistake. Oh man, it was just so much fun. Super rewarding, super engaging, super fun. Probably a bit too broken though regarding the damage thing, and that's like understandable. But I think it definitely nailed the fun aspect, and it definitely had the best risk reward gameplay for a tank. Maybe not enough risk though. I can agree with that.
Well, it was strong.
It was pretty busted, but it was still fun. You know, that's what counts. It's a game after all.
Yeah. All right. I've missed playing it on Black Rock Foundry. Now I regret it a lot more. I kind of started playing Bloody Cat at the end of WOD, and I was so shit that I was actually kicked from my my challenger group because they weren't getting the challenge. I think it was gold. What was it at the time? They were not
challenge mode.
Oh, challenge modes.
Yeah. They weren't getting gold
chill.
with me on the team, and I was like, this sucks so much. I thought this only happened in high school. Why did it keep happening? Right. That's when I discovered Bloody Cat and actually fell in love with the space. Like, this is pretty cool. Like so many things on it. That's how I view things. I was like, it has many things. That was what was important for me. All right. What about you, Dark?
I'd probably say WOD. To be honest, WOD was when I got pretty heavily into Blood. Like I did challenge modes in MOP on 4 classes, and Blood DK was just one of them. But it was WOD where I really got into selling challenge modes and going for realm bests and things like that. And like the guys have said, like Breath of Syndragos had to be one of the funnest things to have in game, and even things like Plague Leech talent was really cool in regards to managing and then bringing back, like multi-strike. I enjoyed those aspects of the game a lot, especially in challenge modes. Having Army of the Dead as a Blood DK was insane, being able to pop it before the challenge mode started and then run in and pop it again. Like double army pulls to just take no damage and just breath to like, it was a really fun, engaging DK sort of time with the spec. It was busted, like it was busted out the wazoo, but in saying that, I remember doing like no healer challenge modes with the Brewmaster and Chi torpedoing through the group and still being able to keep everyone at full health because it was so busted as well. So it was equally busted specs going on in the game while that was happening, but it was probably the most engaging and fun Blood DK version we've had, I think. I'd miss that. I'd bring that back in a heartbeat.
You have Bone Storm now.
Yeah.
Good one.
It's not the same.
It's not even close.
It would have been better if your character just yelled "Bone Storm" and everybody could hear it. That would have made the skill complete.
It was just, it's like Vance was saying before, like you had so many decisions that went into your gameplay when you were playing with Breath of Syndragosa, and you had that real risk reward factor to where if you made a mistake, did you have to death strike and dump a bunch of runic power to sacrifice your breath? Like it was a really thought-provoking build that you would get to manage. And Blood DK has always been one of those specs that punishes you, seconds later after you make mistakes. But this was a really good version of the class, and why we can't go back to it.
The spec had real feedback as well.
Oh yeah, it did actually.
It's unlike Blood DK today, where you make mistakes and you gradually fall behind. But in WOD, you felt the mistakes.
Well, kind of. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the iteration of Blood DK, more or less, that most of you guys favored was pre-Legion at the very least. And Legion changed a lot of specs for a lot of people. They wanted to do more spec fantasy over class fantasy, because obviously they had to work in the spec legendaries, which it's fair enough, I suppose, but it did get stripped. And in Legion, was it in Legion when we lost runes, when we just got blood runes all around?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a stripped layer of complexity that they took away. I think I remember the argument about that, but did they say anything about why they've changed why they've went from WOD, from multi-strike, and from all of those other things? What was the Vengeance, or the set that was
Resolve.
Resolve. All right.
It was Vengeance Mop then.
Yeah, Vengeance was Mop.
Yeah.
They definitely went away from that. Why do you guys think they went away from it, and why do we have the current iteration of Blood today? Because just looking back, and even at my dumbass playing it in WOD, it's no comparison to what it is today. There was a lot more things going on, and things pop in my head like, oh my god, yes, I had breath and fucking army, man, and on Blood. So this spec fantasy dedication that they seem to have been going on kind of diluted a little bit, because there's not a lot to put in. And at the same time, we had things in Legion that kind of made it into a talent tree, like consumption, that doesn't really do much, which was always as I played Blood mostly in Legion, more in Legion, and consumption was such a cool thing to do. Regardless of how strong it was, it just felt really awesome. But what do you guys think of the development of DK and how it got to the point that where it is today?
I think that question is better split in two parts: the additions and the reworks. Because for instance, for the reworks, we have Rune Tap, which was basically the active mitigation in WoD. And it was required on quite a few mechanics, as in there were a lot of AM checks. And in Legion, they decided to strip this completely, make it a talent, and just make it a kind of burst damage reduction charge system-ish. It's kind of difficult to describe what they were going with on that one. But they still kept the AM checks. Some of it just feels like they reworked things, but not fully. To the point that, I mean, there were AM checks on Dark Rule, there were the AM checks in, what was it, Blackrook Hold on the second boss? And the only way to pass those AM checks was to Death Strike before the hit, initially. Which made no sense.
Was that for the mastery? What is it? Bloodshed?
No. It was just for a 3-second buff, which is the recently Death Strike buff.
Oh, okay.
Just so you would not take the extra damage or the 100% extra damage debuff on those bosses.
The knockback in Neltharian's lair and things like that as well. Yeah.
So midway through Legion, they then decided to add Marrow Rending as an active mitigation variant. So you now had recently Death Striked that also counted for Marrow Rend and forced you to waste Bone Shield charges before the hit. Like, just nonsensical changes like this. In terms of the runes, I think it was more just simplification, in that the rune system, even with the 3 different types, or 2 different types later on, was still relatively simple to manage, but just daunting to a new player. And basically, I think the simplification was just for that. It was just to basically make it look less like having 4 different resources.
There was a huge prune moving from WoD towards Legion. I wouldn't be able to find the post, but I do remember they had stated they wanted to simplify classes because they'd felt it had gone, things had become too complex. We'd had too much button bloat and things like that, whereas the classes were probably at their peak design. And then they wanted to oversimplify everything. And I remember every single tank, like, that was where we went away, from WoD into Legion. I remember Blood DK had completely changed around. We got Marrow Rend for Bone Shield charges and things like that. And I didn't actually mind that, but I remember playing Brewmaster the first time, and you could play Brewmaster in Legion on a 1-button macro because it was all the rage that came out when it started. And I was kind of like, what the hell did they do to this class? But they finite stripped everything back, moving from WoD forward. And that's like Mandl was saying with the runes, it just became about a simplification factor, because I don't know if classes were becoming too complex for what the general public was seeking for WoW, or what the reason was, but yeah, it definitely got dumbed down.
Well, do you think that I would imagine it had a lot to do with the fact that they were planning to add the Demon Hunter as a class, and whether or not they just couldn't find anything to add to the class, because obviously it was pretty bare bones as a class would be. And if you would compare, if they would have kept Blood Decay and obviously all the other specs in their WoD iteration with maybe 1 or 2 changes moving into Legion, and then you put Demon Hunter into it and realize like, oh my god, the spec has almost nothing. Obviously, they had the tendency to lower the barrier of entry for new players, which is a little bit weird, because I don't know if they figured out recently that there's not a lot of new players in WoW. It's mostly just us, old people that have been playing. I've been playing the game for like 5, 6, 10, 12, 14 years. So I'm not sure if they see that, but obviously the community, whether it was Blood or not, they've been crying out for a lot of things, hence the unpruning of Shadowlands, which is, debatable of the loosely used term of unpruning. But it's clear that people want more, people want complexity, people want depth, because you just get bored. I mean, BFA was alt for Azeroth that was so cumbersome to grow, because you just didn't have much. Well, you've got your Azerite, and you played the next raid tier, and it's just getting those same Azerites at a higher eye level. It's well,
I don't necessarily think people want simple or the opposite of it. I think people just want meaningful.
Exactly, that's what I think.
Meaningful choice.
There's going to be a really unpopular opinion on this one, but when you mentioned that Demon Hunter was a stripped down class to an extent. Vengeance was actually really deep in 7 more. Like, up until the point where they buffed the living crap out of Spirit Bomb, Vengeance Demon Hunter was actually a deep and engaging rotation before that. And I still have no idea why they did this, like why they turned something that required thought into a tube button mash fest.
I remember when they added the Spirit Bomb. Whew, the times. That was not okay for anybody. That was not a vengeance.
No, but like in 7.0, Spirit Bomb would only take 1 soul fragment as opposed to up to 5. And you basically used it just to keep the debuff on the targets. Other than that, you basically played around it, basically making use of the 10% leech that it would give you. That's something that went away when I think the AP multiplier was like ×5 or ×6 when they changed it in 7.1. That was the simplification. Before that, Vengeance was decent-ish.
But back to our blood talks. I did have something to play off what you said, Mandl, in that Rune Tap was the de facto active mitigation back in WoD, and they switched that to talents in Legion. But they still kept the encounter design or the damage profile that tanks would take similar, where you would need active mitigation. They kind of swapped that around with Miranda and everything. But correct me if I'm wrong, at least for the majority of BFA, you would probably almost never take Rune Tap, even though it was, by design wise, like you mentioned, supposed to be your active mitigation. Why is that? If the game still has these moments where, you know, tank busters, whatever you want to call them, where you would need like something strong to reduce the damage that you take, why wasn't Blood Tap taken anymore, at least in BFA?
Rune Tap, not Blood Tap. And I mean,
right.
Going back to WoD and before, there's also a key difference in that Death Strike up to a certain point was runes, not runic power.
Oh, right. There was a time.
So you had a meaningful choice there that went away. When they brought it back as a talent and then later on baseline, it still costs a rune. But the outcome is that you basically can't get as much runic power as you would on Hard Strike, for instance.
So I was going to say, if I can chime in, that they basically transformed Death Strike to be a spender. If you think of the basic like builder spender paradigm, as opposed to this is a primary resource and you can spend it on this, or this. So they basically stripped the choice and just made it a binary spender option. So you build just so you can Death Strike.
As a result, now, you build as effectively as possible. And if you don't need it, why would you take the penalty?
And so speaking of the history of the changes of Blood Decay and how it is now, how do you guys feel about the current design of the Blood Decay in Shadowlands in the current meta? Obviously, I don't know how much you guys tested the 9.1 raid, but in terms of the overall content design, raids and dungeons, how do you feel Blood Decay tackles all of that? Does it need anything? Does it like not match with other tanks or anything like that? Like, because there's obviously community perception about it that doesn't really fit. Blood Decay is not a bad tank. Personally, I feel very comfortable on my Blood Decay. The only time I don't is when I obviously overpull. And I don't think, unless I'm under-geared, I don't think raids are specifically hard on Blood Decay, unless, you know, Mythic is definitely different. But what do you guys think of how Blood Decay performs in Shadowlands? If the design choice that they made for the spec is okay, if there's more that they can be adding or changing and anything like that, especially in terms of legendaries and conduits?
I've been doing all of the testing on Sanctum so far, and all of the encounters are 1 or 2 targets. So that in itself means that you're not getting as much healing as you could do on even higher target count fights with hemostasis, buffing your Death Strike from your blood boils. Of one of those fights, it has regular occurrences where you need to grip adds, and that is a niche of Blood Decay. But of those adds, you only really need to grip 1 or 2 of those at a time, and it's quite infrequent, so that can just be delegated to DPS Death Knights, or you just have a third tank that just does all the gripping for everyone, and they use the double grip legendary. It can finally be crafted. Other than that, if you kind of stack Blood Decay against other tanks in the raid, it doesn't have a raid buff or debuff. AMZ, I'm sure we'll get onto that a lot later. Mass grip just isn't really that vital. in the new raid, and that's kind of been Blood's go-to reason as to why you would bring them in on a particular encounter. So if we look back historically, you'd see everyone use a Blood DK on Kill Jaden just for one mass grip in the entire 10-minute fight. Or you'd see them getting used on Agrimar just purely for grips again. It's also quite similar on Protection Paladin. You'd only really see them in droves where there's a very key mechanic that can be completely removed by that tank choice. So triviality of the encounter happening because of tank choice is a large reason of why you would bring a tank that just doesn't bring a buff or debuff. And that just still isn't quite there. But that's not to say that Blood DK is bad. It's still a good tank, and you can still do all of the content with Blood DK or any tank at a wide variety of eye levels for all of Mythic. It's just that if you're looking purely from an optimization perspective, very few guilds need to do this. Probably wouldn't bring a Blood DK.
Did that change? Was that because you mentioned this putting it against the 9.1 content? Is it any different for Nathria? I mean, we know the strength of AMZ and how good it was for Nathria, but outside of that, was there any other reason to bring a Blood DK?
Nathria, exactly the same. It's just that in Nathria, you didn't have any reason for grips.
And
The EMZs could be brought by Unholy.
DMZ were brought by Unholy most of the time.
Just adding to that, there was like uses for grip, but they weren't really significant uses. So like in Council, you can like grip the little ads. In SLG, you can grip the what are those little wind dudes called? The ads?
Skirmishes.
Yeah, you can grip the skirmishes to make it slightly easier for melee to hit them if like all three are up at the same time. Really niche things.
That's another case where you can just cover it with a Necrolord DK, though.
Yeah, exactly.
DK or even a Brewmaster Monk, because everything that can be gripped can be clashed as well.
Yeah.
Or Vengeance Demon Hunter, I guess, as well.
And
Grip is smaller, so it's a bit harder.
I wanted to play off what you said, Panthea, because I'm actually a little bit curious. I know because I played Blood DK in Nyalotha Heroic, so it's not the same as Mythic. But I remember group being really good on Hive Mind, but outside of that, wasn't really impressed with how many times I needed group. But your examples were mostly Legion raids, Agrimar and Kill Jaden. And that happened a while ago. Do you think that they're just not designing enough encounters that can take advantage of Blood DK's strengths? Or do you think that the kit for Blood DK maybe is a little bit antiquated and that may need to change? Because we can definitely see when it comes to meta at the very least, specs that are at the top of the meta are usually specs that work really well with their encounter design, not necessarily specs that either do the most amount of damage on paper or not. Whereas we can see probably why Fire Mage is so good, and specs that usually have very short bursts for the way that the bosses were designed so far in Nathria, depending on how this will be in 9.1. But in terms of like Blood DK, do you think that they're just slowly just not making content that favors them? Because from an average perspective, that's kind of how it looks. I don't feel like I have. If I come as a Blood DK to my guild's rank grade, they're gonna be like, oh my god, thank God you came here. Now we can do this so much easier. It doesn't.
There was one in BFA, which was Mechatalk, and to an extent Stormwall as well, when people were abusing the D&D bug.
Okay.
Yeah, Stormwall Blockade. That particular example was just countered by having a Frost Mage, which is a lot easier to fit into a raid comp where you have 14 DPS slots versus 2 tank slots. And for Mechatalk, Blood was great there. So was having Druids and knockbacks, because you could just root those ads as soon as you knocked them into place. So there were reasons, but there were also alternatives. And then when you're looking at a very limited pool to use, so 2 tanks, you kind of look to see what's our best uses in those spaces. But then kind of crawling a bit further back to Legion, where Blood DK representation was quite high, it's not to say that Blood itself was OP as a spec. One artifact trait made it quite desirable in Mythic Plus, and that was when you used Consumption, it gave the group Leech. That made the group in Mythic Plus have a lot of self-healing that they could do quite rotationally. It meant that the healer had more freedom, and typically when you're looking at tanks, most tanks will play just one tank. So you'll play the tank that you have the most ease with the widest array of content. Because there wasn't any particular reason to bring any specific tanks for most of the raid encounters in Legion, it made Mythic Plus a lot easier. So that meant a lot of tanks were playing Blood DK there.
Remember the times of consumption in Leech. Ooh.
Yeah,
It was pretty crazy.
If we're speaking about Nihilotha though, Twilight Devastation, baby. Am I right?
I mean, yeah,
Oh, boy.
Blood DK had the highest stamina
Oh.
multiplier, so yeah.
Yeah. I remember running 3 haste multipliers and like 5 Twilight Devs, 6 Twilight Devs.
That is by the end.
Now
Right?
that was fun. Oh,
Yeah, our blood decay was like constantly wrecking us. I mean, it was like, oh my god, dude, no. I mean, why am I here? What's going on?
Yeah,
And
that was a very interesting tier, as the kind of predictions up until that point was tank damage is probably going to get buffs. All of the testing, no tanks were really taking any damage. So it's probably going to get doubled. So Blood DK is probably not going to be that great. Then the raid came out. They didn't adjust the tank damage. So it was like, okay, who can abuse the living heck out of all of the corruptions?
Yeah.
That just changed
guys-
overnight.
what was the second last fight in Nihilotha again?
Carapace.
I just remember mass gripping those ads, and then like, oh my god, I got a Twilight Dev proc, and then everything just dies pre-nerf. There wasn't any fun gameplay choices or anything. It was just broken. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like,
tracking back to Legion as well, like the encounter design played a huge part into it. Like Agramar, the ads that you had to grip would come from all around the platform,
Yeah.
as opposed to being in a certain space. And on top of this, you could abuse server ticks on that one, so that you could mass grip 4 ads into Agramar and only take the base damage as opposed to the buff damage of the AoE. It's things like this that makes mass grip super desirable on some fights.
I think Panthea said it well though, where he did say, and I think it's a thing the community miss a lot of the time, is that every tank is viable for every piece of content in the game pretty much. And it's only at that world level where that real consideration needs to come into it. And especially if you've got 2 tank slots and, you know, if Havoc shit and you want to bring in Vengeance, so you've got the debuff that Vengeance provides, and that's something you do. If Windwalker's not performing well and Brewmaster's always going to be a decent raid tank, but you get the physical damage buff from Brewmaster if you're not bringing a Windwalker and things like that. So, but it's only at a really top level where that's a consideration. And I think that's a big part that gets lost in community discussion around, raid encounter designed for tanks and things like that. And Agramar's a pretty big exception to it, where Blood DK made that fight a lot easier. But for 90% of the community, like, every tank is going to be fine for every single piece of content that they're wanting to do. It just gets filtered down the wrong way, and then the community just seems to grab hold of what the top 10 world guilds are doing, and that must be what they need to do.
Yep. I mean, every tank also brings its own unique thing as well. Like, we haven't seen any Transcendence abuse just yet, but I'm pretty sure we're going to see some at some point.
There's some that you can do next.
Yeah, thought so.
But to kind of call back to this tier as well, within the first 20 guilds that did Mythic Nihilotha, all tanks were used.
Clearly, this is something that obviously we're doing YouTube content for pretty much all the specs in the game. We do have a particular, a few particular attitudes that we try to impart in our videos. One of which is like, you can pretty much play anything that you want, because when it comes to competitiveness, what people don't understand is that to be able to play the meta, you have to be able to play the meta. And the thing is, people just want to know, people just want to be told what's good and what to play. And obviously, just looking at the world first, since it's very mediatized, it's, I don't know if that's the word. Esports basically are a good source to figure out, okay, if they play it, then I should be able to play it. But then again, you know, if you don't play a fire mage and fighting 4 to 5 packs consistently, whenever you have combust, you're just doing like regular damage like everybody else.
I was going to mention the fire mage thing, particularly in Mythic Plus. Like, I've seen so many people pick up fire mage and then either not press combustion, hold it for way too long, or press it in the wrong moments, where they end up being basically bottom DPS every fight.
Yeah, that's...
If you copy the top end understand why they play it in the first place.
Exactly.
That's the big advice. And the same thing goes for any spec, by the way. Like, whenever you start progressing a fight or something like this, if somebody has already done it on the spec that you're going to bring, go check logs. Inspire yourself on cooldown usage, on anything related to this. See how they do stuff, rather than just going, well, I'm bringing a fire mage, so I must be good, yeah?
Yeah,
I
so...
think another really huge point is to it as well is people put too much ownership around like this gets a little bit away from what Mandl's saying, but people put too much emphasis on things like their talents, legendaries and things like that, rather than putting it down to just playing their class properly as well. Like the effect the user has on whether you like live or die versus the gear you've got, the stats you've got, the legendary, it's not as big a deal. We saw it in season 4 of BFA with versatility corruption. I can think back to Noggy using Rune Tap and everything that came with that as well. Your survival comes down to so much of your rotation and your decisions and dungeon knowledge and things like that, or encounter knowledge versus, if you've got 2% more versatility and things like that. And generally people look to blame those issues on spec and everything else I've just mentioned before they look at, maybe it was me, pressing my buttons incorrectly, or as Mandl said, if you're playing a fire mage because you see the top person but you're holding combust for 5 minutes or something like that, or you're not pressing it on the wrong packs, then that's the reason you're not performing, is because of you. It's not because of the class, it's not because of anything else, it's because of the player.
I think this is an unfortunate side effect of them adding external player power systems that scale your power. And I think the most obvious time that this was, obvious was in 8.3, when the corruptions inflated your player power so much that pretty much anybody can do almost anything. And you could play... well, I mean, we know how certain specs were played and performing really well at the time. But you could clearly, let's say, not compliment, but compensate the lack of skill with external power that was just doing a lot of work for you. I don't remember if this was ever a thing prior to Legion. But I don't remember in WoD thinking that, even as a scrub player myself, I don't remember it's like, oh my god, if I get that one trick and I'm just gonna be an entirely different player, or whatever it was, or that one tier set, or whatever. I still felt like, I have all this gear, and I still fucking suck. There has to be a reason, right? So, and that was always kind of a thing with RPGs. As far as I'm concerned, how I grew up is like, okay, I can get all of that cool stuff, but if I don't play right, it's besides the point.
Yeah, it's something I've said a few times of, if you're looking at min-maxing, focus on the min.
Oh,
that's raise that minimum level up to a point where optimizations actually matter.
I mean, just to bring an anecdote, there's arcane mages right now doing 23s, yeah?
I have heard stories of arcane mages. Legends.
I've been playing it just for memes in the past 2 weeks, and bloody hell. Like, it's gonna hurt when Prideful goes away.
Oh, it's because of the Prideful.
The whole point of arcane mage is mana management, and Prideful gives you infinite mana.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about that. I thought it was just the damage inflation.
I have Prideful, and it's really fun to play. Like, if you have a mage, just try it. It's not as good as Fire, but it's a hell of a lot more fun.
I've seen some snippets of I don't know. There was this dude that did 140k arcane blast. I was like, what the?
Yep.
It's a lot of numbers to show on the screen at one time in Shadowlands. I don't know. This is what I can say. I did have one specific thing that I wanted to ask you guys, and obviously this goes the same for Mythic Plus and Raid. And this is something I discovered to an extent in BFA, and it's narrowing down more. It's being nailed down more and more each time. When we did the research for the tanks, and I was talking to Mandl, Blood Decay pretty much favored any external gearing source that favored DPS over tankiness. Either the trinkets, trinkets are a good example. Either the trinkets were just not well designed for DK, and maybe you guys can talk about as to why that is.
Let me stop you right there. It's because all the tank trinkets are shit. It's not because the DPS.
Oh, okay. So in that case, all the Blood Decay legendaries are shit too, aka super strain.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are. take a good
You mean
example.
I should take
Yep.
off my 226 blade armor trinket? What? Really? No? What?
Oh, you have that?
Have got it in the first place.
That hasn't been a quicker disenchant in my entire life. What a dog shit. No. That's shit. But what is the other one in Halls of Atonement that slows you down and this?
Stone Heart.
Yeah, holy shit. That's a cluster. Gee, I couldn't believe it's like, oh, I'm a DK. I have Death's Advance. I will negate that slow.
Like, it gets even worse when you compare it to scale, where you're like, okay, you can get an absorb for your entire max HP every 2 minutes versus what, 600 armor? Like, it's just no.
Weren't there a pair of plate bracers in BFA that gave you parry chance, if I recall, or something like that?
Yes.
Oh, Mechagon, yeah.
I put them. I think I was testing them on the warrior just stats wise to figure out exactly. Okay, is the parry chance going to be impactful enough? Not to mention that parry fundamentally is just RNG. And I popped it and I was like, okay, do I have another pair of bracers that I can equip instead?
The worst one was the tank trinket from Mechagon, the one that gave you 3 stacks of a buff that had a minimal amount of armor. And every time you took a melee hit, it would reduce by 1. And you're like,
that's so bad. See, because of little things like this, if it happened like once in a blue moon, you would say, okay, they kind of fucked up. But it seems like it's a little bit consistent. Like what happens once in a blue moon is something like the N'Zoth trinket, right? Or the skill that we have now, which are good for at least some of the tanks, really good enough. But most of the tank trinkets kind of off the mark. And whenever I tank, I was like, okay, what is gonna give me the most amount of stats?
They're always absorbs in some way or other. And I feel like there is a fundamental misconception on when it comes to item design as to the value of armor. Because every single garbage trinket is armor.
Oh, what about the Darkmech trinket in Legion? Use that for the entire expansion.
Arcano Crystal? No, it's not Arcano Crystal, is it? The one that gave
was
you...
from Withered Gym.
Yeah.
It gave you a good amount of armor just constantly. And it would go up or down every few seconds.
Oh, yeah.
I do remember that, yeah.
And you used it for the entire expansion. It was like, okay, one of my trinket slots is done.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's been the exception, though.
Yeah, it's usually that there's one good tank trinket per expansion.
I mean, there's 2 right now, but yeah.
Oh, what is the second one?
The cheat death trinket.
Dunking.
Yeah. When it comes to high keys or dangerous content, like it allows you to not have to pick purgatory.
I can subscribe to that, but that might not be because I was doing high keys. But we're not gonna talk about that. That's not important. That's not relating to blood. We did talk a little bit about how blood kind of was in the past and kind of how it is now. How does it look in 9.1? I mean, Panthea tested a little bit of the raid. I don't know if we have full access to the dungeon yet. I haven't actually had a lot of time to spend on the PTR. But moving forward in the way that the content is designed and the legendaries that we get, for however much you guys know about 9.1, what can you talk about Blood Decay, and is there anything good that's gonna be on the horizon?
Extra 6% to all active abilities. Big game changing.
Oh, right, that's the damage buff, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
In practice, it's a bit less than 6% thanks to, it's not buffing pets, it's not buffing auto attacks, it's not buffing, it's only buffing what is whitelisted. So,
yeah, you said it was about 4.5% before, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Less than that if you have DPS trinkets, obviously.
And playing on what you just said, and maybe this is a question that Dark can answer as well, since he does more Mythic Plus content. I know that I was talking to you, Mandl, after at a certain point when they buffed the Crimson Rune Weapon Legendary, or what's the name of it, that makes Dancing Rune Blades give you Marrow stacks and whatnot. And we were still debating if it's better or not than Super Strain, just because Super Strain adds a little bit more damage and runic power generation, which is probably the runic power is really what Super Strain might do the best. But that just, again, comes back to what I mentioned, is like either they're not designing cool defensive stuff, like Prot Warrior Reprisal is really cool to play with. Even the wall, which is a boring, shield wall, cooldown reduction reduced, is still more interesting because if you get it often enough where you can rotate it on packs and think about your cooldown rotation, that's a fun playstyle, at least for me. But Blood Decay, outside of the Crimson Weapon, which I think is really cool, most of the time you might still use Super Strain, or at least some of the time you might still use Super Strain, which is just damage and a little bit of runic power generation, no? And why do you think that is? They're not getting like the design wise, or what could Blood Decay get defensively that would be really cool? And it's like, okay, fuck Super Strain, let's
Let's go back to the legendary first, like the Crimson Rune Weapon one. Before the raid came out, we had a whole bunch of people going, I want to craft a legendary. I want to craft a legendary. What should I craft? And I was actively recommending people to craft that at rank 1, just because it is a fun legendary to play around. Even in the pre-buff version, it was fun to have Dancing Rune Weapon every minute. Like, it didn't have the rune regen at the end, it didn't have the extra bones, it didn't have anything like that, and still it was fun, because it changed your rotation, it changed the way you approach content. Rather than having cooldowns every 2 packs in Mythic Plus, you would have it every pack. And threat is also a problem for Blood Decay, because we have no upfront burst. That legendary helps on this. Now, obviously, the moment you get to high keys, like really high keys, the moment you have no cooldowns, you're out of the pack. And that's where Super Strain picks up, because you're out of the pack, so your dots still tick, you still get runic power, you still get damage. Whereas Crimson Rune Weapon does nothing for you. So it's one of those cases, and you can see it on the leaderboards. Like, people up to like plus 20 or so will play Crimson Rune Weapon, and then they'll gradually switch to Super Strain, simply because they're out of the pack more frequently.
The tank kiting meta.
And Crimson Rune Weapon, I think, to get the most value out of it, you also have to kind of think about when you're going to be using it as well. Like, you want to be using it obviously off cooldown as you're going into bigger packs, but you want to be trying to aim so your bone shield stacks are dropping below 4 by the time you activate it, so you're not wasting the resources from that. You also have to take into account the extra runic power that you're going to gain at the end of it as well. There's a bit more, brain power, I guess, that goes into getting the most out of that legendary, where Super Strain, like Mandl said, it's set and forget. You just put it on and you don't do anything differently. And then you also get the value when you're out of the pack. And the runic power gain from them isn't hugely different. It's just you obviously have access to Crimson Rune Weapon, to Dancing Rune Weapon a lot more with CRW on, which, has its own value for just burst damage there, because we really lack in damage. Like, we really, really lack in our damage output compared to other tanks. It's scary. That's
been a problem for Blood Decay for a while, though, right? Because I remember, at least in BFA playing, I could not do anything with anybody until I got damage corruptions. I could not hold aggro. It was crazy. I've learned to use grip as a taunt because I wasn't able to keep aggro. And obviously they did the 6%, and this comes back to how it seems like they're buffing classes, because they said that they don't want to really do big buffs in the middle of the patch, and now we're not in the middle of the patch anymore. And the 6% is, let's say, mediocre would be putting it mildly, because I think one good example of this, because we talked with the Fury boys as well. Fury was pretty shit at the beginning of the tier, and then it got buffs, and it got buffs again. I think it was like 3 instances of buffs or whatever. And that actually made Fury at least above average, but I think it's doing a little bit better than that. And I feel like all of those buffs that Fury got incrementally, like 3 stages, were like the 6%-ish, 3 to 6%-ish type buffs. So I feel like maybe we can get more than just 6%. Do you think like just overall buffs to multiple abilities are the solution, or maybe to specific abilities might be more oriented, like maybe not 6% overall, but like 10% here and nothing there, or something like that?
But AoE, the problem is Blood Boil. Because fundamentally it does nothing. Like, when you compare it to other tanks, its front-loaded damage is very, very small. So I'm not going to say going back to World 6.0, where Blood Boil was hitting like an absolute truck, but somewhere in between, where Blood Boil either does a bit more damage, or a lot more damage, or has an extra threat modifier on it to help Mythic Plus. Because it's both Blood Boil in terms of damage, and the fact that it's on a charge system that doesn't allow you to speed it up. That causes a problem.
Just make it like Avatar Thunderclap in BFA, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, just I mean, when like something like when Dancing Rune Weapon is up, the charge cooldown is halved or something like this. That would be a simple change.
That'd actually be cool. We fixed it. Done.
Yeah.
Okay, Blood Boil fix. That's actually a really good point, because when I think of Blood Boil and comparing to other tanks, I think of Thunderclap, or in this case maybe Revenge for Warrior. What is it? Rushing Jade Wind for Monk, and Consecration for Paladin. Although the damage of them differs, but they all kind of contribute to their kit somehow. Thunderclap can reset Shield Slam. Consecration gives you damage reduction. Blood Boil gives you dots, and it's supposed to be leech. Like whenever I look at Blood Boil and Blood Plague's like, oh, it's leeching, it's giving me heals, but I've hardly ever feel it. It seems like they really want to drive that point. I was like, oh, this is gonna heal you, but
it's the lack of synergy that hurts, and it's also the fact that you have competing priorities when you engage every pack.
Exactly.
Because you're going to want to have Bone Shield up, which, by the way, if you're a good DK, you'll have it from the previous pack. But if it's the first pack of the key, which is usually a big pool and lusted, you suddenly need to bring up Bone Shield. You have to, if you didn't know that you could keep Runic Power before the key starts, you have no Runic Power as well, so you have no way to Death Strike. You need to grab the mobs as quickly as possible and make sure they don't kill the EPS. What do you press? What do you sacrifice? Do you sacrifice yourself or one of your teammates?
I just feel like Blood needs another AoE in general.
Mhm.
Either like a Rune Spread or like a 10 or 20 RP dump that just like does piece damage, but just gets high aggro.
And there's a lot of
It's a design problem though. Like it's an issue that's made by designers, like because they took a fucking sledgehammer to the spec and destroyed it. Like
it's
how
not
this was
necessarily
fixed back in the
destroyed.
day. It's like how this was fixed back before like Legion. Even is you had to decide like you were spending your runes, right? So before homogenized runes were a thing, you could just keep spending runes on Blood Boil, right?
Yeah.
But you had a choice between that and Death Strike. But because of how they've massacred spec, for lack of a better term, there's just not that choice anymore. Because they've moved where Death Strike is. Now it's a spender, right? So you're just spending up your runes to just put it in like a filler resource. Then you're going to spend it eventually. And then they just gave Blood Boil charges, because originally like it didn't even have a charge. It was just like one. And then it had like a 5-second cooldown from memory, right? Like on like BFA maybe, or on Legion, I can't remember. Like
It was BFA.
I don't know, it's just so pointless, man. Like, and it's been that way for years. But
Do you think they might have attempted to sort out the choice issue when going into a pack, or even on a boss? Although maybe on a boss is not that difficult because you just pop Dancing Rune Weapon. Do you think they attempted to solve that issue by just making Rune Tab baseline? Do you think that's
yes
why
and
they?
no, because it doesn't really solve the problem. It just marks it. Like Panthea and I were theorizing and providing feedback on that one, where we also have dead buttons in the kit. Like we have Descarez that basically does nothing. And for all intents and purposes, the runic power that you gain from hitting Descarez is equivalent to Morrowind, except that obviously, since one is 2 runes, you get double of it. Why not just remove Morrowind entirely and make Descarez gives you the bones? Suddenly you have a way to gain Bone Shield from range, initiate a pull, and solve this dilemma all at once.
That would be an interesting addition.
Yeah, but it's things like this where there's a conflict of interest in the spec. In like when you initiate a pull, afterwards it's sort of fine up until the point where you're out of melee for 10 or 15 seconds. But like the problem is on the pull, where you have 3 things that you need to do and you can only do 2 of them.
Yeah, just stay well, man, dude. Easy.
I guess that's where our old advantage of having Bone Shield just set on a button to press to gain. How many stacks did we gain when we pressed the Bone Shield? Like I don't even remember, but
6,
we
I
used
think.
6? Yeah.
Like I wasn't very engaging gameplay in that sense, but the spec had so many other things that wasn't an issue. But at least we had that option. We didn't have to worry about, like Mandl saying, the several choices you have to make moving in or out of a pack. Yeah,
Do you?
Virtual wasn't even a significant part of the spec.
No.
Legion, though.
It was a
Yeah.
20% minor cooldown. It was basically equivalent to AMS in terms of relative strength.
Mm.
But you use that to help get everything else set up because you had your charge resources. So you had what was that spell that converted your disease into runes?
Really?
on one target?
Plague Leech.
Plague Leech, where you could
Plague Leech,
sacrifice your diseases off to get 2 runes, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're setting up you're setting up a disease for Plague Leech, so right? So you're putting up diseases with like a Icy Touch and like Plague Strike or whatever, or Outbreak if you had that. You were spending runic power, not from Death Strike, to set up your rune taps. Sorry, your blood taps, right? So you were setting up all these other resources. So if you quickly made a mistake or you quickly had to get some resources, you had buttons to press. And you had to micromanage which ones you wanted to press because which ones would be more cost effective. And it was always like the idea of like filling like a bucket with water and you have to make sure it doesn't like topple over. Now it's that, but it's literally just do I press Death Strike or not?
Yep.
That's the gameplay thought, isn't it? I could go on about the stages, sorry.
That's okay. You did say that Blood Boil doesn't have synergy with the spec, and maybe this can segue into what I wanted to ask you next. I mean, hemostasis is maybe a big part of the reason you play Blood Boil now, at least in AoE, right? To buff the Death Strike. Obviously, that doesn't reduce the damage that you take, and it doesn't give you bone shields or anything like that. So it's kind of like you press it, but you don't get really the effect until later. Do you think they should make a hemostasis baseline? And while we're at it, can we talk a little bit about the talents? Because there are a couple of talents that I almost never seem to need to use.
And they're on the same row, by the way. Like rapid decomp and consumption are about the same strength relative, but why would you pick either of them when Hemo is on the row? Like there's so many wasted opportunities in the talent tree just due to a certain number of talents that are basically mandatory picks.
Yeah, we kind of get we have the first row is really good in regards to getting to choose between Blood Drinker and Heartbreaker, because you get like a single target and then you get an AoE sort of choice. So you get a meaningful pick out of 2. And then the last row is quite good in regards to you've got, Purgatory, Vampiric Blood or Bone Storm. So you get meaningful choice in 3 selections, but just doesn't really carry that way through the tree. Will of the Necropolis is always going to be a pick. As Mandl just said, Hemostasis is always going to be a pick. And then we kind of had Relish in Blood and Blood Tap, but Relish in Blood just ended up kind of being the default go-to as well, because majority of the time, most people were going to stuff up playing with Blood Tap. Anyway, it would put them further behind just picking, an autopilot Relish in Blood type of deal. And then, row 40, we actually get a choice, but it's just,
Not really, though.
Yeah, well, that's true. No, that's true as well. We need a slow to run the fuck away. I'd just like to see, personally, I'd like to see more talents that interacted with Bone Shield and did something from using Bone Shield charges. I don't know what, but I think that would be a really cool way to make the spec interesting again around choice. If you had talents that you would have to sacrifice, Bone Shield charges or whatever to get X, Y, Z effects from and things like that.
I mean, Tombstone would be a good example on that one, where it's currently stuck on the talent row where it's never going to be picked. Simply because out of the 3 talents, it is the only one that is RP neutral or RP deficit. And the moment you have more than 2 targets, you're going to pick Heartbreaker anyway. It's more DPS, it's more survival.
Yeah.
I mean, even then, Tombstone costs 5 Bone Shield charges. That's a lot.
Yep. Yeah, it brings you out the box.
Yeah.
It's a talent that if you made it baseline and if you tweaked it so that it you keep the same relative strength, but you make it cost 3 bones rather than 5 as a baseline ability, it would be a really good addition to the kit.
It'd be fine. Yeah.
All this highlights the lack of design, though, in the spec, because you have plagues, they do nothing. You press them, you forget them. You have bones, they do nothing. You keep above 5 because of ossuary. That is it. You have a whole bunch of resources that are basically maintenance buffs that you just need to keep up and not do anything with. The rest of your kit is you basically take your runes, you convert them into runic power, as effectively as possible. You use your blood boils because of a talent, and you basically go along and have fun with that. Basically, it's a builder spender in disguise.
I do that. That reminds me of the Bone Shield. Definitely is a resource that they can definitely play a little bit more with, and the fact that it's kind of like bare bones outside of the talents maybe is one of the reasons why Oshie became also baseline. Obviously, it was the talent to pick in the talent row to begin with for a reason, and now that you mentioned Tombstone could become baseline with a tweak or two there, just goes to show that okay, we have this potential of a resource that we can play with. That's Bone Shield. That's a little bit more interesting, and even however boring it is, what is it, Brewmaster's Mastery that just gives you dodge, that still feels a little bit more interesting to play with than it is with Bone Shield, though you probably just, it's also kind of a passive and forget. But yeah, Bone Shield, you just build it, it's there, and as long as it doesn't drop, it's fine. And
Here's the thing about Burn Shield. Systemically, it is the same as Festering Wounds.
Yep.
You're spending runes to make a tertiary resource, but there's nothing interesting that you really do with them ever.
Yeah, it's not like Festering Wounds where you actually have impact on it. Like you can choose when to pop them and how to pop them.
Yeah, and I mean, like, shit, even they did something, like, interesting with Razor Eyes, at least in Legion. They scrapped it because, like, for whatever reason. But Shattering Strikes was still, like, interesting and it saw its gameplay and stuff like that.
Yep.
Of course, it was held up by tier sets and whatever. I don't know, man. I feel like they could just scrap Bloodworms, make it a mastery or something like that, and just, like, have a fresh row just for, like, design space to explore.
I didn't mind. I don't think it was fantastic in its implementation, but Spectral Deflection was pretty cool when that was in game. I didn't mind the concept behind that. That was interesting. I don't know if the threshold on it was too low, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
You have to remember that most of the Spectral Deflection stuff, like most of the impact or negative impact on you, was lessened by the artifact traits as well.
That's true.
You had the artifact traits that would give you a chance to absorb double.
Yeah.
And you had the other artifact trait that gave you a chance equal to your crit to not consume a bone.
I haven't actually checked. Did we get anything in 9.1 specifically, like Covenant Legendaries and anything? I haven't seen anything for
all the
BK.
legendaries are dog shit.
Oh,
Yeah,
Covenant
basically.
Legendaries, but we've talked about that.
Yeah, it's like that for every spec apart from like 2 or 3.
Yeah, Necro Rogue. There was another one as well, but like it's exceptions rather than the rule.
right. There seems to be
not a second legendary that you use, like one specifically Covenant and then one for your spec.
I find it weird that they're not conduits because they're tuned to the same power level.
That's what I found weird, because systematically all of the legendaries have been incredibly underwhelming for most specs, and they've changed. For instance, the only one that I personally know that they've changed after they announced it was the Discipline Priest with the Mind Games, where it no longer gives you 2 charges but has a weird interaction that just makes it dead, which is a little bit weird. So I don't know what their plan is, because if you wouldn't know any better, it seems like the Covenant Legendaries are just meant to be like a second legendary, a complementary one, like a specific, you can have whatever legendary you want and a Covenant Legendary.
If they were just a second legendary, there would be no choice though. It would just be another gear slot being essentially, I
suppose,
just by the legendary.
Some of them are just really weird though. Like the Swarming Mist one is really odd.
It's
like to activate it at high runic power when it's something that gives you tons of runic power. Like,
not just that, to have to literally spam rune tap during it to maximize its effect.
Yeah,
like it just doesn't make sense, and it feels counterintuitive. It feels like basically designed through a spreadsheet rather than actually designed in game.
Tyrion one does absolutely nothing on single target.
Yep.
Because it needs to spread in order to activate.
And you did say that there's fewer multi-target bosses this time around in the new raid?
Yeah, so let's see, Tower Crucible. So Ida Jailer adds every minute or so. The 9 has 2 targets at the start of the fight for the first 2 minutes of the 7-minute fight.
I'm guessing there's going to be ads on like the Sylvanas part or something, right?
Yeah, we haven't seen Sylvanas yet.
Yeah.
Does Kel'Thuzad have ads? Doesn't Kel'Thuzad with a bunch of ads?
Kel'Thuzad has
Oh, Kel'Thuzad is shit on
during the intermission, and it also
Mm.
has pillars that you can spread stuff to throughout the main phase.
Hmm.
Ner'zhul has orbs that you need to kill as a priority target.
All right. Well,
I haven't seen his, or is that like the Shadow and Berigo inspired, or?
Ner'zhul is what's going to be known as the knockback fight. You spend about
Oh, yeah.
50% of the fight getting knocked from one side of the room to the other. You will have KJ and Knight.
Oh, it's one of those.
No.
that sounds
Getting Manoroth flashbacks now.
sounds like fun. Sounds like fun for low mobility classes. Do the knockbacks match the cooldown of Death's Advance? Do they sync? I mean, I would imagine you can immune them, right, with Death's Advance?
You can immune them with AMS. Secret tech right there.
Ooh.
But
Do they
it's
know?
multiple knockbacks on some players, and you dispel them to trigger the knockback. So you get the raid all stacked up, and then you dispel someone, you get knocked to the other side of the room. The other person then gets dispelled or their debuff times out, knocks the raid again in a different direction.
I have an important question because I've done KJ and I know how bad it is. Does Revival dispel it?
It did on Heroic, doesn't on Mythic, so they fixed that now.
It's
It sounds a lot like KJ.
Yeah, it's reverse KJ. Instead of getting gripped, you get pushed away.
So with Blood in particular, there's a community perception of that Blood is the tank that self-heals. You don't really need to pay much attention to a Blood DK. But when you start to look a bit more into log data and you look quite a bit deeper into damage taken, there's a little button there that says EHRPS, and that stands for external healing required per second. So that's the amount of healer attention each person required. When you start to compare Blood DK against all other tanks, it's quite a similar amount of number. Even though their HPS is higher than all other tanks, the actual external healings or healer attention they need is quite similar, because Blood takes all the damage to their face and then heals it back up. That's just how the toolkit works. It looks great on meters. And then you have this meter effect of, if I've got a Blood DK, they're doing lots of healing. But if you start to look at other tanks, they're not doing that much healing, but they're reducing their damage taken. So their damage taken is lower, their external healing required is the same. So if we look at Brewmaster, for example, it will stagger damage, it will purify damage. That purified damage deleted from the game. No one knows it's happened, apart from the monk because they press purify. But we can reverse calculate it, and we can see using some logs that I've got from this week, my healing just normally was about 1.3 million, and then purified removed 1.5. And that is a missing effect from the meters. If that was added to the meters, people would think Brewmaster's great, it's removing all this damage. With Purify, you just don't see it. Then you can extend that to all other tanks. How much did Shield Block stop? How much did Shield of the Righteous stop? How much did Iron First stop? How much did Spike stop? It's all there. It's all kind of hidden in a way, and you kind of need to dig a bit deeper. But Blood DK, it's all there at face value. That's kind of what leads to this perception of Blood being a great self-healing tank.
And it's also factors into what most people say, that the HP yo-yos a lot, but Blood DK just takes more damage than every other tank on the maturity. So the way I see it, and usually tell people, is measure, I suppose, the runic power bar, because when I'm out of runic power, I'm fucked. But when I have runic power, it's very hard to die unless I really fuck up the rotation.
I would say when you're looking at a Blood DK, just think of them as having two health bars. They've got the health bar and the runic bar. If both are low, it's a bad time.
That can be extended and should be extended to all the tanks. Like, recently I've seen a lot of paladins and a lot of protection warriors not pressing Shield of the Righteous or Shield Block. Because, well, first of all, it's really hard to tell how much those two abilities are actually doing. So there's a lack of feedback, like in-game feedback. And on top of that, you have Word of Glory and Ignore Pain showing up on the healing meters. It's the same thing. You have really, really strong AM, well, in the case of Shield Block anyway, not actually having any kind of feedback loop to the user. As a result, people get baited and, press the thing that shows on HPS.
It's all important to show on those meters. God.
Is that the issue though? Is it? Is that feedback related, do you think?
I think it's user feedback related in that you press shield block, you can see how much is being blocked, but you need to dig into logs to actually go and see it. Like there is no reward for blocking things, and there is no visualization of that damage being there.
As opposed to like ignore pain, where you get like a buffer and then you can see it actually drain.
Yep.
I think the way that they can fix that is to just make boing sounds when you block. I think that solves all of the feedback needs that you have. Yeah. That's
I mean, yeah,
for
DK has feedback in the same time, like with that whack-a-mole gameplay that it sometimes revolves into. Where you've like banked up AP, you're getting like your ass kicked in by Sludge Fist, who's hitting you for like 40% or 30% of melee. You take 2 melees, you do 1 swing of Death Strike, and your health goes back up to 80%. That's pretty significant feedback.
And the best example for this one was actually, I mean, the one I can remember was KG or Argus, where like you would be, during Fell Claws, you would be taking 100+% of your maximum health, and you'd be fine because you'd be riding the Blood Shield train.
It'd be cool to see Mastery get a boost and Blood Shield become something that felt valuable again, something that felt solid. Like, and it was talking about Ignore Pain, pressing it, and then watching that Ignore Pain value like tick down. It would be cool to, like, I know that we can obviously track Blood Shield with a week, but it disappears so quick. It would be cool to see that at a much stronger thing and be able to actually monitor your Blood Shield that wasn't just gone in one melee swing, basically.
That's another thing where there were interactions in the kit that all got removed. Because if you remember, there was another Legion artifact trait that gave you 25% leech when Blood Shield was up. I had a lot of fun getting rank 1 HPS passes for memes on Mistress on that one. Because Mistress did shadow damage. It wasn't consuming Blood Shield. As a result, I had 25% leech the entire fight.
I'm very curious if part of the issues with that could just be solved by overhealing done, just go straight into a Burn Shield or something like that. Sorry, not Burn Shield, Blood Shield.
Yep, that would be a good way to fix it.
Yeah, because then it makes all the leech talents a bit more relevant as well.
It also makes
like Voracious and stuff like that.
Yep, it makes it even better for high keys as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Finally, I'll be able to equip Mastery. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, Mastery is good at the moment. Like, the reason it was dog shit for 2 expansions is because most of your kit, like all Azerite, all Essences, all of that stuff did not scale of attack power.
Well, that's definitely one way to look at it. And obviously, this proving community misconception, because perception can be sometimes good, sometimes bad. It's very important. And you heard it here, healers. If you see your Blood Decay healing a lot more than you, that's not because he's a better player. Maybe he is, who knows? But that is because he's taking more damage. So actually, I didn't know that. Like numerically wise, Blood Decay still needs roughly the same amount of healing as everybody else. But it's a good point of reference and a good set of track of mind to be in when you're playing Blood Decay, and obviously when you're healing a Blood Decay, I suppose. All right, well, boys, we're kind of nearing the end of our time since due to the restrictions of the platforms, we cannot keep it too long. But I do want to end this with something that I mentioned a little bit early on, which is if you had the power, if good old Ian Hazakosis came to you, or working at Blizzard for like an exorbitant amount of money, so it's worth it, and he said, hey, you guys gotta make a new ability for Blood Decay or bring something back, a mechanic from the past, or 2 or 3 or whatever, and it doesn't matter the balance, it doesn't matter how much it costs, do it. What would you guys get into the DK kit? That would be really cool. Either it's a new concept or something that was before. What do you guys think? And we can start with whoever wants to chime in. And if you want to take a time to think, that's fine. We'll edit the time out. That's not a problem.
Can I have 2 changes rather than 1?
Sure. Go for it, man.
Greedy bastard.
Tombstone baseline.
Okay.
And rework to Bone Storm, where instead of taking all the runic power all at once, it drains it. So basically, Breath of Cindergasa.
Ooh, does it have a cap to how much it drains?
Just, for instance, 10 per second.
Oh, okay. So it's still the 10-second cap. It's not like Breath where you keep it up for as long as...
No. Like potentially infinite.
Bones of
Ooh.
Sindragosa.
Oh, that would
Yeah,
be so
Bones
cool.
of Sindragosa.
Oh, that would be so cool. Oh my god, I just imagine just getting healed constantly with
I
it.
don't even have to rework the acronym BOS. It works.
And stuff.
Like this would fix Bonestorm as a cooldown viable for every kind of scenario. Not the best on the row, but definitely situationally good. As opposed to the thing where you need to pull full RP or nearly full RP in order to press it, and by that point you're dead in high content.
Can I follow up?
Oh, sure, go for it.
Basically that, but to extend it, you have to use Death Coil.
So we'd actually press it, you mean?
Yeah.
Isn't Death Coil consuming runic power
You
though?
actually have a choice between Death Strike and Burnstorm at least.
That'd be cool. Actually, that'd be cool.
It'd be interesting at least. I'm guessing
Yep.
Death Coil would have to be like balanced.
Oh.
And the actual like uptime difference would have to be like what, 4 seconds for it to actually be useful. Maybe more than 4, but
So it wouldn't be draining runic power anymore, but you can extend its duration with Death Coil.
yeah.
Oh.
But you have to have a choice between Death Strike or Death Coil.
But I don't have Death Coil on my bars.
That's the thing. Not many people do.
No one does.
But I definitely have a second one that's just like a 10 or 20 runic power spender that does like minuscule damage but has insane threat generation in AoE.
Yep.
Maybe on
Okay.
a like 10-second cooldown or something, but yeah.
I mean, it would fix the problem that our main, like, the highest damage per execute time in our kit is Death Strike, and it's pure single target.
Mhm.
So
See,
that
with
would
this
solve it.
segment, yeah, exactly. But like with this segment, I like making like fun shit, but there's so many issues with this.
Oh yeah, so
Is this
yeah.
when we bring back Trox's document? Most of it is still applicable.
Oh, Trox's document.
oh, what is Trox's document?
Oh, it's a
Like
How do
a
we
70-page feedback document
The
on the
DK Bible. Mm.
DK Bible. Yeah.
Oh.
The DK design Bible. I should
Oh,
probably say.
we need that. We need that. We're gonna add that into the description. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Ooh.
70
It's a very good
pages.
read. Like, it's a really good read.
I haven't read that many pages at once in a while, though.
It took me more than a day to read a book like that.
Is it current? Is it for the Shadowlands version of the Blood Decay or?
No, it was like what I think.
He did
It was-
one for, 2 for what, I think, and then
Yeah.
quit when it went into BFA.
Yeah. The last one was on the changes going into Legion, actually.
Oh, was it? Oh, there you go. Sorry.
Oh, he revised it. Huh?
Dude, I don't know. I'd bring back Army. I don't know how well it fits anymore, but I miss having Army of the Dead. As a DK, just in terms of, I don't know, RP fantasy wise of the actual class you're playing, having Army of the Dead was something that was really cool. It was also really good in regards to going into ridiculously big pools if you hadn't used the turnip for rune generation or bone shields or whatever, and you weren't going to get into a pull on time. Having Army of the Dead as a mass taunt, being able to build resources for when Army eventually died off to be able to, engage that pull as a tank was a really cool thing to have. It was also a really good defensive to have in the middle of large pools as well. But I just think it fit the class really well. And I get how they've divided that up to, Unholy and Breath to Frost and things like that. But it was really cool in that WOD DK feeling like a complete DK. You had Breath of Sindragosa, you had Army of the Dead, you were this complete DK package type of thing. I think that was really cool.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if they've done this for any other spec, but they could just make Army have different effects based on the spec. So on Blood it could taunt, and on Unholy you can still smack shit really hard. That's
Yeah.
that could solve. That could definitely solve the we're starting a dungeon, we're lost in the first pack. I need to survive to build resources issue.
Have you done Halls of Atonement recently? How fun would the frontals be with random ghouls taunting all over the place?
It would be
Oh.
awesome on Necrotic though. It would be
Ooh.
amazing on Necrotic.
Yeah, I didn't think about the frontals. See, this is why I don't theorycraft. all right.
Use Treants for the exact same reason.
Yep.
That's true.
For me, I really like stupid stuff that makes you do more damage. So it would be Blood Mirror,
Blood Mirror was awesome.
Give me that risk reward. That isn't so easy to capitalize on the reward. Actually make it a risk.
Yep, completely agree with that one. I still have no idea why they removed it because, like, I mean, you've pointed it out time and time again on feedback. Like, Brewmaster Monk has the same thing.
Yeah,
Just
they added
dumber.
it back for Brewmaster on Nizal. So when you purify, 25% of your purified damage goes into the next stomp that Nizal does. So what I've been doing on farm is I've been turning around, sitting down, getting crit in the back so that I get a load of stagger, so that I purify, it does 50k damage with the next stomp.
Ooh.
I'm
Okay.
up to 9k DPS as a tank.
Huge.
My defensive windows.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Finally, I can bring back my /sit macro. Put it on the bars. You still get crit if you sit?
Yep.
Or-
Yeah.
All right.
If you sit, you get crit. If you turn around, you can't dodge, parry, or block.
Yeah. It's important to note that the crit only happens on melee white damage, but most of it is, like, most of the damage coming out today is just that.
Mhm.
Then, important caveat: I do not recommend doing that.
you heard it here, folks. Don't parse your brewmaster damage. But you're probably why the reason why a lot of brewmasters won't get good parses right now if they don't do that, right?
I mean, it's the only way to get passes now.
Yeah.
So I just noticed over the last few weeks, my pass is getting lower and lower. It was like,
No, you cannot have that.
wrong.
You run out of gold to pay your priest, man.
PI only adds like 4 DPS for Brewmaster.
Oof.
It doesn't really do much. It's the same for Windwalker as well.
Wait,
Hmm.
not even a legendary pass on Denathrius?
I get annoyed if like someone tries to troll PI me at like the last 4 seconds of the boss. It's like, why'd you do that? Now my pass looks weird.
People will say, he got PI'd. Well, this was a wonderful talk, gents, and I personally had a lot of fun. We definitely ran out of time, but obviously, if you're cool with it, we would like to revisit Blood Decay further down in 9.1 once with the patch is out. What is it? Maybe 2 months, something like that. It's probably still gonna be a while until it's out. And
It'll take that long to organize our schedules anyway, so that's all right.
yeah, I was about to say, it's like we can start scheduling a date now, and by the time the patch is out and the raid progression is done, we'll have a freaking date down. But it was really fun talking to you guys. I'm glad you guys were here, and if you want to check everybody out, we'll have descriptions down below for Twitches and YouTubes and Twitters and all of that, and TankNotes.com as well. And you can check all that. And of course, if you want to talk with the big Blood Decay brains, everybody should definitely check the Accurate Discord channel, where you can find a lot of helpful and updated information about anything and everything with Blood Decay. And thank you very much, Dark, Bant, Mandl, and Panthea, for coming today. It was a blast. You'll be able to find our episodes on MarcelianOnline on youtube.com/MarcelianOnline. It's obviously on all of the platforms, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and all of that good stuff. Thank you for tuning in today, and see you next time.
Still I play WoW. Still I play WoW.